So welcome to this latest video on 162 Maths, and in this video we're going to the AQA GCSE Maths past paper of November 2023, higher tier paper 3, which is a calculator paper. Now before we get started working through this paper, a little reminder that I'll include a question breakdown in the description below so you can see what topic each question relates to, and this is particularly useful if you struggle on a particular question. You can see what topic it relates to and probably go back and review and revise that topic. And I'll also include a link to the 162 Maths contents page, which gives you easy access to lessons that go over all the topics in greater detail, along with topic tests, audits and exam paper walkthroughs. Now if there are any mistakes made in this video, I do apologise, and I'll also add this in the description, so it may be worth giving that a quick look to see if there's any errors that you need to look out for. So let's get started on question 1. So question 1 reads, the first four terms of a linear sequence are 6, 13, 20 and 27, and the question is asking us to write down the expression for the nth term. So for this, to work out the nth term, all we need to do first is work out the difference between each term, or consecutive term I should say. So here it's going to be plus 7. So that means that if plus 7 is the difference, then 7n is going to be in the formula. And then to find the number that we add from that, we go, what do we need to go from 7 to 6, or the first term? We need to subtract 1. So the nth term is going to be 7n minus 1. Moving on to question 2, it says square A is enlarged to square B. Write down the scale factor of the enlargement as a fraction. So to work out the scale factor, it's the side on the new shape, which in this case is B, so that's going to be 8, over the corresponding side in the original shape, which is A, and that's got a side of 12. So all we then need to do is write 8 over 12, and we can simplify that, which simplifies to 2/3, or you could write 4 over 6. But any of those fractions would be fine for the one single mark, but I would always opt for simplify. I always encourage my students to always simplify the fraction where possible, regardless of whether you've been asked or not. So I would have gone for the answer of 2/3. Moving on to question 3, it says the length of a line is 8 centimeters to the nearest centimeter. Complete the error interval. Well, if we've got the nearest centimeter, now all we need to do is divide that by 2, so that becomes 0.5 centimeters. And then if we take the line that's been rounded, or the measurement that's been rounded, that's 8 centimeters. So what we need to do is plus or minus 0.5. So 8 minus 0.5 is 7.5, and 8 plus 0.5 is 8.5. Moving on to question 4, it says at what point does the graph y equals x cubed minus 1 cross the y-axis? Well, where it crosses the y-axis is when x equals 0. Oh, don't know what's happened there. So to work out the y-intercept, all I then need to do is to substitute the value of y equals 0. And what we get then is going to give me minus 1. So here we get y equals minus 1. So that gives me my coordinate of 0 minus 1. Moving on to question 8, it says Carly's total annual pay is equal to a salary plus a bonus. Work out the percentage change in her total annual pay. So for this, and state whether it's an increase or decrease. So with this particular question, with it being worth 4 marks, the first thing we need to do is find out what last year's pay was. So last year's salary. So to do that, all we need to do is just basically add these two numbers up. So here that's going to be 26,000 plus 4,000, which comes up to a total of 30,000. Then what we then need to do is then work out what the new salary is. Now to do that, what we need to do is do some percentage increase decrease. So when we've got a 6% increase, our decimal multiplier is going to be, well, 6% plus 100% is 106%, and that as a decimal is 1.06. Then with a 9% decrease, that's going to be 100% minus 9%, which is 91%, and that as a decimal is 0.91. So for this, we need to multiply by 0.91. So to find the new salary, that's going to be the sort of salary amount, which in this case is going to be 26,000 multiplied by 1.06 plus the bonus, which now is going to be £4,000 multiplied by 0.91. Now if I do that particular calculation, I can then work out what the new salary is. So if I type that all into my calculator, I get a salary of 31,200. Now the question is asking for the percentage change. So to work out percentage change, we need to use the correct formula. So percentage change, it's the difference divided by the original multiplied by 100. So for this, what we need to do first is work out the difference between the two salaries. So it's 31,200 minus 30,000, which is 1,200, divided by the original salary, which is 30,000, and we multiply that by 100, and we get an answer of 4%. Now from here to here, what's happened to the pay? Well, it's increased, so then it's going to be a 4% increase. And it's really important that you do include the word increase, as it does specify that in the question. Now moving on to question 6, it says an exhibition was open for 240 hours and had 29,760 visitors. For 2/5 of the time the exhibition was open, there were 172 visitors per hour, and for the remaining time, how many visitors per hour were there? Now for this, as it's worth 4 marks, it's going to involve a fair amount of working out, so it's really important that you understand the steps that we're working with. Now when it comes to these questions, generally speaking, the order in which the information is given is usually the order in which you need to tackle this question. So for this, we know that the exhibition was open for 240 hours, and that for 2/5 of the time the exhibition was open, there was a rate of 172 visitors. So for this, the first thing we need to do is work out what 2/5 of 240 hours are. So we do 2/5 times 240, which gives us an answer of 96. Now if I then multiply that by the rate, which is 172 visitors per hour, so let me just write hours here, and we multiply that by 172, that means that during that 2/5 of the time that we had an attendance of 16,512 people. Now in terms of the remaining time, so the attendance in the remaining time, which is going to be 3/5 of 240, is going to be 29760 minus the initial attendance, which was 16512, and that gives us an answer of 13248 people. Now what we then need to do is then work out the remaining time. So if the total time was 240, we know 2/5 of the time was 96. So do 240 minus 96, which gives us an answer of 144 hours. Or alternately, I could have just worked out 3/5 of 240, that would give you the same. And so therefore the rate is going to be the number of people, which is 13,248, divided by the time, which is 144 hours. And that gives me a rate of 92 visitors per hour. And there we go. So when you're looking at visitors per hour, basically this is what the numerator needs to be, and this is what the denominator needs to be. And then it's just a case of finding those two bits of information and then working out the rate. Then moving on to question 7, it says the first two cube numbers are 1 and 8. Show that the third cube number can be written as a sum of 3 different prime numbers. So again, there's going to be quite a lot of different answers you can have here. Now the third cube number is basically 3 cubed, which is 27. So this box here has to read 27. Now for the remaining 3 boxes, what we need to do is just find 3 prime numbers that add together to equal 27. Now for this, I would always encourage my students to write down the prime numbers. So 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23 and 29, but we don't need to use 29 because we're looking for three numbers that add together. Now for this, there's several combinations you can have, and it doesn't need to be written in this order, but you can have 3, 5 and 19 as one option. You could also have the options of 3, 7 and 17, or you could have the option of 3, 11 and 13. And again, you can write those numbers in any order that you wish, but the combination of the three numbers must be the same. Then moving on to question 8, it says circle the largest number. So again, it's just a case of adapting the fact that we've got reoccurring decimals, but the one you need to circle for the biggest number is going to be our last option of 5.34 recurring. Moving on to question 9, it says use trigonometry to work out the size of angle W. So the first thing we need to do with trigonometry is we recognise it's a right angle triangle, so we're going to be using SOHCAHTOA trig. So for this, what we need to do is label the triangle. So I always recommend to my students to always label the hypotenuse first, because that's always the side that's opposite the square. So that's H. The side that's opposite the angle in question is O, and the side that's remaining is going to be A. Now you can see here we've got no information on the opposite, so I can get rid of that. So I'm looking for which trig ratio uses A and H, and that's going to be cos. So cos theta equals A over H. So using this formula and substituting the values in, I get cos W equals, and it's going to be 6.7 over 8.3. So to work out W, it's going to be the inverse cos of that fraction, so 6.7 over 8.3, and if I type that all into my calculator, I get an answer of 36.2, and that's going to be degrees, and that's written to 1 decimal place. Now the question doesn't specify how they want the answer written, so you could either just copy your answer from your calculator as a 9-digit number, or you could round it. But if you have rounded it, it's always good practice to state what you've rounded it to, whether it's to significant figures or decimal places, and the number is entirely up to you. So just make sure that it is rounded correctly, and if you're ever unsure, just simply copy the answer off your calculator. Moving on to question 10, it says 2 bags contain only green disc and yellow disc. Bag A contains 1 green disc and 4 yellow discs. Bag B contains 3 green discs and 7 yellow discs. 1 disc is picked at random from each bag. Complete the tree diagram with the correct probabilities. So from this, let's have a look at the information that's been given. So here we've got bag A. We've got a total of 5 discs, so that means the denominator is going to be over 5. And out of those 5 in bag A, 1 of them is green and 4 of them are yellow. So the fraction we need to write on our first set of branches is 1/5 and 4/5. Then for bag B, we've got a total of 10, so that's going to be our denominator. And then bag B, we've got 3 green discs and 7 yellow discs, and we just need to copy that into the second set of branches, so that's 7 over 10. Then for question 10b, it says work out the probability that both discs are green. So for both discs being green, starting at the start of our probability tree, we're going on this branch here and then this branch here, and that keyword of and. So the probability of both being green is going to be 1/5 multiplied by 3/10, and again if I stick that into my calculator, I get an answer of 3 over 50, which can't be simplified, so there is my final answer. Then moving on to question 11, it says solve these simultaneous equations, and we've got 7x plus 2y equals 100 and 3x plus 2y equals 48. So with this particular question, what we need to do first of all, see if we've got the same number or quantity of x's and y's. Now in this particular question, we can see that we've got the same number of y's, in which we've got 2. And the next thing we then look at are the signs of the y's. And as you can see, as they're both the same or both positive, what we're going to do is we're going to subtract both those two equations. So from this, we've got 7x take away 3x, which gives me 4x. 2y take away 2y leaves me with nothing, which is expected, and 100 minus 48 gives me an answer of 52. So then working with 4x equals 52, I can then establish that x equals 52 over 4, which gives me an answer of 13. So x equals 13. Then once I know the value of x and pick one of the equations, so using 3x plus 2y equals 48, substituting x equals 13, so I've got 3 lots of 13 plus 2y equals 48. 3 times 13 is 39 equals 48 rather, and then 2y, taking the 39 over to the other side, I get 2y equals 9, giving me a y value of 4.5. So then there are my two values of x and y, so x equals 13 and y equals 4.5, or you could write it as a fraction of 9 over 2. Moving on to question 12, it says AF, BC, DE and DF are straight lines. BC and DE are parallel. P is 3 times R. Work out the value of angle P. So as we've got parallel lines, we just then need to remember our rules of parallel lines. So we've got corresponding supplementary angles, we've got alternate angles, and these are the kind of rules you want to see if you can match this up with the diagram you've got. Now from this I can see that this angle here is going to be 72 because it's opposite, and this angle here is also going to be 72 because I've got a corresponding angle, or F angle as they used to formerly call it, so that angle there is going to be 42. Now using this information here, it says P is equal to 3R, so instead of writing P, I'm going to write this as 3R. Now taking that triangle, what we then find is that 3R, let's try not write with a highlighter, so let's get rid of that. So what we then find using this triangle here, that we have 3R plus 72 equals 180. And the reason why it adds up to 180 because angles in a triangle add up to 180. So then turning this into an equation, we get 4R plus 72 equals 180. And then all I need to do is then solve this for R. So what we find is that 4R is equal to 108, leaving me with an R value of 27. Now the question doesn't ask me to find R, it's asking me to find the size of angle P. Now P is equal to 3R, so P is going to equal 3 multiplied by 27, which gives me an answer of 81. Moving on to question 13, it says 100 people were asked about the distance they travel from home to work. The table shows information about the results, and for 13A it says write down the greatest possible number of people who work from home. So for this to work out the greatest number of people from home, well, they're not going to be travelling at all. So looking at this first row, we're looking that D could be inclusive of 0 but exclusive of 5. So what's the greatest number of people that could be working? Well, from that first column, the greatest number it could be is those 21 people are all 0. So for our answer for part A is going to be 21. Then for 13B, it says one person is chosen at random. Work out the probability that the person travels at least 10 minutes. Now, 10 miles. Now, at least 10 miles means 10 miles or more. So that's going to be this frequency plus this frequency. So from this, 10 miles or more is going to be equal to 37 plus 18, which gives me an answer of 55. So then the probability is going to be 55 divided by the grand total of people who were asked, which is 100. And we can simplify that fraction as 11 over 20. Or alternatively, you could write it as a decimal. But with these questions, particularly with probability, you can just write your answer in any way. And you don't really need to simplify your fraction. But as I've said previously, I would expect all my students doing higher to simplify just automatically. And again, when you've got a calculator paper, there's no excuse. So the answer I would write is either 55 over 100 or the preferred answer of 11 over 20. Moving on to 13C, it says the table is repeated, and it says draw a histogram to represent the results. Well, to draw a histogram, what we need to do is we need to work out the frequency density, and we work out the frequency density by doing the frequency divided by the class width. So the class width for this is always the upper bound take away the lower bound. So it's going to be 5 take away 0, which is 5, 10 take away 5, which is 5, 20 take away 10, which is 10, and 40 take away 20, which is 20. Then from this, I can then work out the frequency density using this formula. And so I'm going to do 21 divided by 5, which is 4.2. I'm going to do 24 divided by 5, which is 4.8. 37 divided by 10, which is 3.7, and 18 divided by 20, which is 0.9. So all I then need to do is then plot this along the x-axis or the horizontal axis against these values here. And what your histogram should look like is something that looks like this, where this peak is at 4.2, this is at 4.8, this is at 3.7, and this is at 0.9. Again, hopefully yours is a lot more accurate than what you can see on the screens. And the widths also need to be exactly as they are for the groups in the table. Moving on to question 14, it says that a solid trophy consists of a stand and a player. The stand is made by removing the small pyramid from a large pyramid, and we've got the details of the large pyramid, which has got square base of an edge of 8 centimeters and a perpendicular height of 16 centimeters, and the small pyramid has got square base with edges of 5 centimeters and a perpendicular height of 10. And it tells you what the formula for the pyramid is. And remember, we'll always be given the formulas for those more complex 3D shapes. And for question 8, it says show that the volume of the stand is 258 centimeter cubed. Now, to work this out, what we need to do is first of all establish that the stand is equal to the big pyramid minus the small pyramid. I'm not too sure why I've put that all in brackets, but it is what it is. And let me just make sure that I'm spelling pyramid right. There we go. Now, to work that out, all we need to do is use the formula that's given to us in that little box. So for the big pyramid, it's going to be a third multiplied by the base area, which is 8 squared, which is 64, multiplied by the perpendicular height, which is 16. And then for the small pyramid, that's going to be a third multiplied by the square base, which is 5 squared, which is 25, multiplied by the perpendicular height, which is 10. So then type in each of these. Now, I would always recommend that you type it in separately onto your calculator. So this first bracket equals 341 and a third, minus the second, the small pyramid, which is 83 and a third. And taking those two answers away, we get an answer of 258, which is what they wanted me to show. Then for question 14b, it says the trophy is made from a metal of a density of 7.5 grams per cubic centimetre. The total mass of the trophy is 2,340 grams. Work out the volume of the player. So for this, if we first of all establish our formula of density equals mass over volume, and this is the sort of triangle we're going to be using. So volume is equal to mass over density. So then to work out the volume, it's going to be 2,340 divided by the density, which is 7.5. So the volume is going to be equal to 312. Now from this, what we then need to do is then subtract this from the stand, which is 258, and that then gives me an answer of 54, and that's going to be centimetre cubed. And there we go. Moving on to question 15, it says that A has a column vector of m3 and B has a column vector of -4p. The diagram shows the vector of 2a plus b. Work out the values of m and p. So if I just have all that information on our screen, so if I use the resultant vector, we've got 2a, so that's going to be 2 lots of m3 plus b, which is -4p, and that all gives me the answer of how to get from here to here, So going this, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And going up, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is what we're now working with. Now, if I translate that into and simplify it, we get 2m minus 4 equals 8. And I get 6 plus p equals 5. So then solving this, we get 2m equals 12. So m equals 6. And then solving this, we get p equals minus 1. So there are my values for m and p. Now moving on to question 16, it says PQ is the diameter of a circle, QR is a tangent to the circle, PQ is equal to QR, and PR is equal to 10 centimeters. And the question is asking us to work out the radius of the circle, giving our answer as a decimal. So from this, hopefully you can spot that we've got angles, we've got circles, so it's therefore going to be using circle theorems. Now, one of the circle theorems is that the radius of a circle meets the tangent at a 90-degree angle, in which we know it's the tangent because it tells us in the question. So that means that this angle here is 90 degrees. Now, you can see that the triangle QPR is an isosceles triangle, which therefore means that this angle here is going to be 45 and this angle here is going to be 45. Now from that we can then see we've got a right angle triangle. We've got this side which we're going to call PQ, which is I'm going to call X. So therefore this is going to be equal to X because it's an isosceles triangle. And we know from the question that PR is 10 centimeters. So from this, hopefully what you can spot is we've got a right angle triangle. We've got sides of the triangle, which is 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Pythagoras to work out what x is. So I've got x squared plus x squared equals 10 squared. So that's 2x squared equals 100. So that means that x squared is going to equal 50 and x is going to equal the square root of 50. So what that means is that the diameter of the circle is equal to root 50. So therefore the radius is going to equal root 50 divided by 2. And if I type that into my calculator, I get an R value of 3. Oh, don't know what number that was. So let's just try that again. We get 3.5355 blah 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 on the calculator. And then if I want to, I could just round it up, or I could copy what's on the calculator, but I'm going to round it up to 3.5 centimeters, and that's been rounded to 1 decimal place. Then moving on to question 17, it says, here is a sketch of a quadratic graph y equals f of x. The graph crosses the x-axis at x equals a and x equals b. Write an expression for the x coordinate of the turning point. Well, the turning point is here, and what the question is asking for is asking me what this point here is. And that is the midpoint between a and b. Now if I've got a midpoint, if I want to work out a midpoint between two values, all I've got to do is just add the two things together and divide by 2. So you could write your answer like this, or you could write the letters in alphabetical order, in which you could have a plus b over 2. Moving on to question 18, it's asking us to simplify 2 lots of x plus 4 to the power of 5 divided by x plus 4 cubed. And the question is asking us to give our answer in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b and c are integers. So if I just start by writing out that fraction again. And what can you see from both top and bottom is that I've got x plus 4. Now at the bottom I've got 3 and at the top I've got 5. So I take out the lowest power. So I'm going to take x plus 4 cubed away from both the numerator and the denominator. So all I'm going to be left with is 2 lots of x plus 4 squared. Now from this, what we then want to do is expand the bracket. So recognizing that x plus 4 squared is x plus 4 multiplied by x plus 4. So if I then multiply these double brackets first, then I'm going to end up with x squared plus 8x plus 16. And then multiplying everything by 2, I get 2x squared plus 16x plus 32. And there is my answer for that. Now moving on to question 19, it says AC is the diameter of a circle with centre E. E is the midpoint of BD, and the question is asking us to prove that the triangle ABE is congruent to triangle CDE. Now when you're starting these particular questions, I always recommend my students to first of all highlight what the two triangles are that we're working with. So triangle ABE is this triangle here. And triangle CDE is this triangle here. Again, excuse the accuracy of those lines there. So when it comes to congruency, we want to prove either we want to show which angles are the same and which sides are the same. So for this, looking at the information that we're given, I know that this angle is going to be the same as this angle as they are opposite. So what we know is that angle AEB is equal to angle CED because they are opposite. And it's really important that when you are doing this that you always state the reason that you're using and what you're basically showing, what your geometric notation is actually saying. So opposite angles. Now we also know that from the diagram that this line here is the same as this line here. Why? Because they're both the radius of the circle. So we know that AE is equal to CE because they are both the radius of the circle. And then finally, the last bit of information that we know is we know that this length here is, and we know that this line here is the same as this line here. Why? Because E is the midpoint of BD. So we know that BE is equal to DE or ED, as E is the midpoint of BD. So then using our geometric notation, we've proved that an angle is the same, we've proved that a side is the same, and another side the same. So try not to use as, but here we're going for, so as we have an SAS triangles ABE is congruent to triangle CDE. Let me just get those letters the right way. E. And there we go. And again, for the 4 marks, this will be worth 1 mark, this will be worth 1 mark, this will be worth 1 mark, and then writing this statement would also be a mark. So it's really important that you don't just say SAS, you always also write this bit of information here just to emphasize of what that actually means. Then moving on to question 20, it says solve 2x lots of x plus 10 is equal to 5x minus 18. So for this, all we need to do is multiply out the brackets for the left hand side. So we end up with 2x squared plus 20x, and that's equal to 5x minus 18. Now you can spot that this is becoming a quadratic, so we make it equal to 0, trying to keep our x squared positive. So we end up with 2x squared plus 15x plus 18 equals 0. And then from this, all we then need to do is then go on to factorize, which this does. If it didn't factorize, I may have to use the quadratic formula, but this one does factorize to 2x plus 3, x plus 6 equals 0. And you can either do that by inspection or using the magic number way. And then from this, we then just need to solve each of the brackets. So 2x plus 3 equals 0. So x equals minus 3 over 2. So that's one value. Or x plus 6 equals 0, in which x equals minus 6. So our two answers are minus 3 over 2, or minus 1.5, or minus 6. So any of those numbers in any order. And if you want to write it as a fraction or a decimal, then that would also be absolutely fine for the 4 marks. Then moving on to question 21, it says water flows from a tap at a constant rate. A container is filled with water from a tap in 40 seconds. The graph shows the height h centimeters of the water after time t seconds. And the question is asking us to state that which container, or if the container is one of these shapes, circle the letter of the correct shape. Now the one you want to circle is going to be D, because it's going to start off quite quick, then it's going to fizzle out as it goes to the middle, and then it's going to increase again at that rate. Then moving on to question 21b, it says by drawing a tangent of the graph, estimate the rate at which the height is increasing when t equals 10. Now for this, what we need to do is first of all establish when t equals 10, which is here, and what you then want to do is draw a tangent at that point. Now your tangent is going to be slightly different, so you want to draw a straight line, imagining that you're balancing it on the curve. Now I always recommend students, whenever you're drawing tangents, move the graph to make it easier for you to draw that tangent. Then from that, what you then want to do is to calculate, turn it into a triangle, a right angle triangle, and to work out using the scale that's being used that the gradient is going to be equal to x over y. It's the distance up divided by the distance across. And then what you should have as an answer for that particular question is you should have, and for the full marks you'll accept any answer between 0.3 and 0.4, and that's your answer for B. So any answer between 0.3 to 0.4, making sure that you have drawn a tangent at when t equals 10. Then moving on to question 22, it says write 7 over 2a squared minus 3 over 5a as a single fraction in its simplest form. So let's just zoom in so we can see it all. Now to get a common denominator, my common denominator for this, and again it might be different to your common denominator. I know some teachers encourage you to multiply the two denominators together to get that common denominator, which in this case is exactly what I'm going to do. So common denominator is going to be 10a cubed. Now to do that, what I've done is I've multiplied the first fraction by the second denominator, and I've multiplied the second fraction by the first denominator, and that's what I should get there. Now if I simplify the two numerators, I'm going to get 35a over 10a cubed minus 6a squared over 10a cubed. Now that my denominators are the same, I can write the two numerators together, which is 35a minus 6a squared, all divided by 10a cubed. Now there is no common denominator with the numbers, but there is a common denominator with the letters, so I can take an a from each of those, in which what I'm left with is 35 minus 6a, all divided by 10a, and that, believe it or not, is the final answer. Or that should be a square. There we go. Moving on to question 23, it says that a chocolate box is in the shape of a prism is being designed. All lengths are in centimetres. The cross section is a regular hexagon with side x, and the length is 5x. An expression for the area of the cross section in square centimetres is 3 root 3 over 2x squared. The total surface area of the box must be less than 650 square centimetres. Work out the largest possible integer value of x, and you must show your working out. Now before we get started on this particular question, let me just zoom out so we can see the question all its entirety. And let me just scroll a little bit across so we've got a bit more room. Now to work out the total surface area, it's the area of all of the faces, in which I'm going to have two hexagons and I've got 6 rectangles. Now in the question it tells me that the expression for the hexagon is 2 lots of 3 root 3 over 2, which gives me 6 root 3 over 2. So that is what this length here is. And then to work out one rectangle, this rectangle here, that's going to be 5x multiplied by x, which equals 5x squared. So then to work out this, it's going to be 6 lots of 5x squared, which gives me a total of 30x squared. So to work out the surface area, what I need to do is just add this and this together. So I've got 6 root 3 over 2 plus 30x squared. And that is got to be less, as it says, than 650. So this is what I'm working with. Now, to simplify this, what I need to do is I need to have a common denominator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this here so that it's over 2. And to do that, what I need to do is just multiply that by 2. So that then becomes 6 root 3 over 2 plus 60x squared over 2. And that's less than 650. And just like before, now that I've got common denominator, I can write this as 6 root 3 plus 60x squared, all divided by 2, is less than 650. Now from this, there's a couple of ways in which you could simplify. I'm going to go for it this way. So first of all, I'm going to take the 2 out, so that becomes a 3, that becomes a 30. So I'm left with 3 root 3 plus 30x squared is less than 650. And then I'm going to take this over to the other side, so I end up with 30x squared is less than 650 minus 3 root 3. If I type that all into my calculator, I get an answer of, and let me just quickly do that. So I've got 650 minus 3 root 3 gives me an answer of 644.8038476. I take the 30 over to the other side by dividing by 30, in which that number's still on my calculator, so divided by 30, that gives me an x squared value of less than 21.49346159. And then to find the value of x, I need to just square root it. So I've got square root of the answer, and I get 4.636104 blah blah blah. Now the question is asking me what's the largest possible integer. Well, the largest integer it can be is going to be 4. Then moving on to question 24, it says that work out the area of the triangle ABC. So for this, I don't know the perpendicular height, so the formula for the area is going to be a half AB sine C. So for this, I only know one side, so what I then need to do is find out what one of the other sides are. So I'm going to find out what this side here is. Now to do that, what I need to do is use the sine rule. And what I find is that x over sine 56 is equal to 24 over sine 73. Now doing a bit of rejigging, I get an x value of 24 sine 56 divided by sine 73, and if I type that into my calculator, I get an answer of 20.806 blah blah blah. So if I can rewrite that as 20.806 blah blah blah. Now just using my mental arithmetic, I can work out what angle A is, or CAB, by doing 180 minus 73 minus 56, and that gives me an answer of 51 degrees. So then to use this formula to work out the area of a triangle, I'm going to use this length here, which is still on my calculator, and this angle here. So to work out the area, it's going to be 0.5 multiplied by 24 multiplied by 20.806, and whichever rounding you've used for that, multiplied by sine 51. And if I type that all into my calculator, I'm going to get an answer of, and let me just do just that. So I've got 0.5 multiplied by 24 multiplied by 20.806 multiplied by sine 51, and I get an answer of 194.03 blah blah blah. So I'm going to round that up to 194, and that's in centimetres square to no decimal places. And in the mark scheme they would accept any answer between 193.9 to 194.1. So any answer between that range would be acceptable. Then moving on to question 25, it says that A is 3/4 of C and 6B is equal to 5C. Work out the ratio of A to B to C. Give your answer in the simplest form where A, B and C are integers. Now, using this bit of information here, what we find is we've got 6B is equal to 5C. And to convert equations into ratios, we need to write both sides as fractions. So if I take the C over to this side and the 6 over to this side, I end up with B over C equals 5 over 6. And what that then turns into is that the ratio of B to C is equal to 5 to 6. And I'm just going to put a little box around that. Now, in the first bit of information, it says that A is 3/4 of C. So what this then equals is that A is equal to 3/4 of C. And just like we did before, we're going to put the letter over this side, so we end up with A over C equals 3 over 4. And then from that, we can then turn that into a ratio of A to C is equal to 3 to 4. And let's put a little box around that. Now from this, all we now need to do is just combine these two ratios together. So if I start by writing A to B to C, then what we end up with is using the first ratio of 5 to 6 and the second ratio of 3 to 4. Now what you can see is we've got a value of C for both of those. So what we then need to do is think of a common multiple of 6 and 4, which is going to be 12. So to get 12, I need to multiply this ratio by 2, and to get 12, I need to multiply this ratio by 3. So here, 5 times 2 is 10, and 3 times 3 is 9, and then all I then need to do is check, can I simplify this ratio? No, I can't, so the ratio is 9 to 10 to 12. Moving on to our next question, so question 26, it says, in a game, these numbered tiles are in a bag. To play the game, you choose a tile at random, one at a time, and do not replace the tiles. You win if at any stage the total of your numbers on your tiles is 10. Amber plays the game once, work out the probability that she wins. Well, let's have a look at this then. So in terms of to win, you can either get a 5 and a 5, or we just need to go through the columns, the sort of outcomes we could get. So you can either get 2, a 5 and a 3, or you can get 2, 3 and a 5. You could also get 3, 2 and 5, or 3, 5 and 2, or you could get 5 first, in which you could then get 2 and a 3, or you can get 5 first and 3 and a 2. So these are all possible outcomes we could have, and what we then need to do is now work out the probabilities of each of those rows. So looking at this, that's going to be equal to, well, getting 1 5 is 4 out of 8, and getting the next one is going to be 3 out of 7. And then and if I work that out, that's going to give me 12 over 56. Then for this outcome, getting a 2 is going to be 1 out of 8. Getting a 5 is going to be 4 out of 7 tiles that are left, because remember, we're taking one tile out and not replacing it. And then to get a 3, I've got 2 out of 6. Then for this one, we then just have the same numbers. So we've got 1 over 8 times 2 over 7 times 4 over 6. This one we're going to have 2 over 8 times, and that's going to be 1 over 7 times 4 over 6. For this one, we're going to have 2 over 8 multiplied by 4 over 7 times 1 over 6. This one here, we're going to have 4 over 8 multiplied by 1 over 7 times 3 over, not 3, it's going to be 2 over 6. And then finally, this one we're going to have 4 over 8 multiplied by 2 over 7 times 1 over 6. Now with each of these, what we then need to do is work out what they are. And what you'll find is that the answers to each of these probabilities that I've written in green are all the same. So if I look at the totals, the total of the purple one is 12 over 56 plus, and it's going to be working out the others. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lots of 2 times 4 times 1 over 8 times 7 times 6. And that comes up to a total of 1 over 7 plus 12 over 56. And working this fraction out, I get an answer of 4 over 14. And there is my answer. Now, there are several ways in which you could answer this question. The way I've showed it probably is a little bit more in steps, but then I've simplified it in the answer space in purple. But if it makes sense doing the long way, then it takes that time. And this is one of the last questions on a paper 3, so it is going to be that challenging, and hopefully you've saved enough time in the exam to do this question thoroughly. Now moving on to our last question, it says that for 27.8 says the graph of y equals x cubed is translated to the graph of y equals x plus 2 cubed. Write down the translation vector. So for this, what we notice is that this has been shifted 2 squares to the right in that direction there. So to describe that as a translation vector, it's going to be positive 2 and 0 vertical movement. And then finally, for the last part, it says the graph of y equals 5x plus 4 is reflected on the y-axis. Write down the equation of the reflected graph. Now to reflect along the y-axis, excuse me if I don't know why that happened there. So to reflect on the y-axis, what we need to do is just basically change the sign of x. So what that then becomes is y equals minus 5x plus 4, and there is my answer. Or you could write the answer of y equals 5 minus x plus 4, in which we get the exact same answer, and for one single mark they will accept it. And to have a 1 mark answer or a 2 mark question at the end of your GCSE era in maths, I think is quite generous and also very rare. And there we go.